afternoon. My name is Kimberly Rodriguez, and today I will be talking about sexually violent predators in California. SVP laws were created in response to a broader concern about how to manage individuals who have committed serious sexual offenses, especially those believed to have a high risk of reoffending. As incarceration rates increased and more people began reaching the end of their prison sentences, states were faced with the difficult question: what happens when someone has completed their sentence but still are considered dangerous? Instead of relying only on traditional parole or supervision, some states developed SVP laws as a way to extend confinement through a civil process that is framed as treatment rather than punishment. A key case that shaped these laws is Kansas versus Hendricks. In that case, the Supreme Court allowed the state to continue confining a man after he had already completed his prison sentence based on the argument that he had a mental disorder that made him likely to reoffend. This helped legitimize SVP laws across the country, including in California. What stands out to me is how these laws sit at the intersection of two competing priorities. One is protecting the public from harm, and the second is by respecting individual rights and the limits on state power. So what does it actually mean to be a sexually violent predator? In California, an SVP is someone who has committed a certain qualifying sexually violent offense and has a diagnosed mental disorder that makes them likely to engage in future acts of sexual violence. In terms of a DSM diagnosis, the most common ones include pedophilic disorder, sexual sadism disorder, and other paraphilic disorders. There's also ongoing debate about whether diagnoses like antisocial personality disorder should qualify in these cases. What's important here is that the diagnosis is not just clinical. It plays a major role in the legal justification for continued confinement. Looking specifically at California law, the process begins when someone is nearing release from prison, usually about within 6 months. If they appear to meet SVP criteria, they are referred for an evaluation. If evaluators agree, the state can file a petition and the case moves through the court system. If a judge or a jury finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the person meets SVP criteria, they can be committed to a secure state hospital. And this is a key point. The commitment is indeterminate, meaning there's no fixed end date. Even though the law is considered civil and is framed as treatment focused, individuals can remain confined for an extended period of time. There are annual reviews, and some individuals may eventually transition into supervised community programs, but release is not guaranteed. When it comes to effectiveness, I think it's important to look at both sides. On one hand, I do agree that public safety purposes are what is driving behind SVP laws. There is also a small group of individuals who may pose a significant risk, and it makes sense that the system tries to address the risk in a structured way. I also think the containment approach, like what Kim English describes, is valuable. It emphasizes things like accountability, multidisciplinary collaboration, and close supervision rather than relying on one system alone. That coordination approach seems more effective than simply releasing someone without support or monitoring. At the same time, I do have concerns. My biggest concern is around liberty and human rights, especially because of the use of indefinite confinement. Even though SVP commitment is labeled as civil, it happens after someone has already completed their criminal sentence, so it can start to feel like an extension of punishment rather than purely treatment. There is also ongoing debates about how accurately we can assess risks and whether the diagnoses used in these cases are being applied consistently and appropriately. All of that makes me question whether the system is always balancing fairness with public safety in a way that it's intended to do so. I also think it's important to distinguish SVP laws from registration systems like the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act. Registration laws are focused on tracking and monitoring individuals in the community, which is restrictive, but it still allows for freedom and movement. SVP laws, on the other hand, allow for continued confinement, which is much more significant deprivation of liberty. In terms of alternatives, I don't think the solution is to remove safeguards altogether, but I do think there are more balanced approaches. For example, California conditional release program has shown lower recidivism rates for individuals who are released under structured supervision compared to those who are not. Similarly, programs like Circles of Support and Accountability in Minnesota focus on community-based reintegration, support, and accountability, and have also shown a reduction in reoffending. These models still prioritize safety, but they do so in a way that it's more gradual and less reliant on long-term confinement. So overall, my perspective is that I understand the support is the goal of protecting the public, but I also think SVP laws, especially when they involve indeterminate confinement, raise serious concerns about fairness and civil liberties. I think the challenge moving forward is finding a balance, one that keeps communities safe while also respecting individual rights and avoiding unnecessary or indefinite confinement. At the end of the day, SVP laws are not just legal policies, they reflect how we define risk, responsibility, and rehabilitation. And those definitions have real consequences for both individuals and societies. Thank you.